In this chapter, we are going to talk about Einstein Discovery, stories, models, and predictions, specifically focusing on deploying predictions. Now, to deploy predictions, before that, we do need to go back to revise some terms specific to Einstein Discovery and assets. We need to double check and create and navigate the story. So again, we're going to more from a review point. And then we're going to talk quickly about tuning the models. That's going to be very important before actually deploying the prediction. And then we're going to talk about ways to deploy the models as predictions and the different ways we can go ahead with that. So the first thing we're going to do is a review of the Einstein Discovery assets and terms. Now for that, here are some of the discovery asset or Einstein Discovery assets you will be dealing with. First, you're going to be dealing with data sets. That is the data you're bringing in, whether it's native Salesforce data or it is external data. You might have only one data set to deal with, or you might have multiple data sets from external data, internal data, and you will use a data prep recipes or data flows to combine the data, create derived fields, or do anything that is related to data prep layer. So again, you're going to bring the data as data sets, maybe one or many. You will combine them into one final data set, including adding some fields. And then you are going to explore them as lenses, because looking at the data set as just an entity doesn't give you an idea of the distribution of the data. So it's a good idea just to explore it, kind of take a look at it, and be ready, or just say, okay, I'm ready now to go and create a story. Once you have explored it, you're going to go to create a story, and you might end up with multiple stories depending on the data you're dealing with. You might create a story for a MEA region, one for APAC, one for EMEA, or one for large deals or opportunities, one for small deals. And when I use story, I'm loosely also talking about the model that gets created behind the story. So you might end up with multiple stories or one story. And once you're done with that, after you modify some of the input variables to produce again these different stories and models, you're going to go and deploy them as a prediction. So you use the prediction as a placeholder or as a name, API name, to go and deploy these models somewhere where they can score the records at runtime, let's say, or even scoring records of bulk. That would be on a Salesforce object as a Lightning component, or as the prediction field that gets created on the object. Or you can use this to call it through an API call through Einstein Prediction Services, API services, so you can score the data on the fly, or you can retake that prediction back to a data flow node, excuse me, and go back and score an actual data set. When I say a score, all what you're doing is bringing the prediction, the outcome to the data in this perspective. Of course, we're going to talk about more than just a score. We also have the explanations or the whys, why the score is that particular number, and what are things you could do to enhance that score, whether you're minimizing or maximizing that. So some of the basic terms, this is a good slide to print out and kind of keep in mind when you're dealing specifically with Einstein Discovery within the Einstein Analytics Plus product. So on the data layer, remember that you have data storage, data sets to deal with. You have a data prep to deal with. You might hear terms as derived fields or some simple feature engineering. Pretty much you're creating maybe a specific sliding week indicator, or you're creating a formula or creating a flag. You might hear some of the hot encoding or pivoting data. So I'm just listing this in case it comes up in conversation. Einstein Discovery, we do hot encode the dimensions, the categorical variables. You're going to hear me using this word a few times. And if you're doing any advanced calculations, so that's all part of the data prep. It does take some time. So that is part of the project anytime you're approaching Einstein Discovery. Now for the story, once you create a story, you are practically creating a model behind it. You are defining the input variables. These could be dates, numbers, dimensions. Again, that's a categorical variable. and you are minimizing or maximizing an outcome, a variable. You will hear things like binning or bucketing. So, numbers are bucketed by default, and you can modify that. There's a grain of analysis, so you can specify what is the level, what is the grain of that data set. So for example, if it's about opportunities, every record will be unique opportunities. If I'm trying to identify if a customer is going to churn, then my data set should be about customers or maybe accounts, and every record is a unique account. You will hear explains. Explains is just an expression to say, for example, how much a variable, a city or a region has a statistical power, or how much it affects that outcome variable that we are trying to increase or decrease, or minimize or maximize. You will hear outliers. Those are values that are not normal. For example, most of my deals are within the range of, let's say, 100K to a million. Then I see two deals that are 2 million or 3 million. That's not common. That's an outlier, or vice versa on the lower spectrum. Strong indicator, meaning that this particular variable, input variable, is affecting or can tell me for certain or with some percentage what could be the outcome. Is it, again, what could be that outcome? Let's say, am I going to win the opportunity or not? Collinearity, data leakage, these are, again, fields that kind of tell you the outcome without them being the outcome. For example, if a customer does churn and you have a flag that says, customer churn, and you always fill out the churn reason, then automatically churn reason is leaking data here, because it's saying it's exactly as if you filled as the customer is churning. And then we will talk briefly about model metrics. That's very important for tuning the model. K-fold validation, we do a 4K-fold validation to test the data, make sure we're getting the best or optimal metrics. And the coefficients, every value under every field, whether it's a date or a number, a bucketed number, or a dimension, it has some effect. We will determine in the training data set, in this data set we're studying, that these values have positive or negative, coefficients on the outcome variable. Once we're done with all of this work, we are ready to deploy. So pretty much, actually, the deploying the prediction, which is usually known as the last mile of this journey, is a straightforward thing. We're going to create a prediction name. We're going to specify if we are deploying to an object or outside, whether to the data flow node or an API call. And we're going to specify the models used. We're going to map the fields, so we know when we get the fields, those values, we map them to the fields in the story, and we give the correct scoring and explanations and so forth. Segmentation, if I'm having multiple models under the prediction, again, one maybe for AMER, one for APAC, one for EMEA, for example. If I am creating a prediction field on the object where I am deploying this prediction, so I can store the prediction there, and I define a terminal state of that record, meaning stop predicting if we hit this terminal state. For example, if opportunity is closed, then there is no need to predict anymore, and we can use this for the accuracy template of the model, where we keep an eye how's our prediction doing, from an accuracy perspective. Finally, this takes us to the model manager, which we will not cover in this particular chapter, but we're going to cover in another video briefly. But this is where you monitor and you check all of your predictions. You can see the usage and statistics. You can edit the models deployed under prediction. You can see the accuracy template. You can also score records in bulk, and that's actually something new as of summer 20. And again, we will actually see this in our next slides down. All right, so for creating and navigating a story, again, just a quick review. We are going to go back and actually create the story that we're going to use to deploy the model. For that, I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually create a specific app. Let me create an app here and say I want to store my work here in this blank app. I'm going to call it, and again, this is the typical daily sales, let's say ED and I'll just put the daily sales ED work. And this is your typical retail sales data set. But in this case, what we're going to do is actually create it. So we have a custom object on this environment right here. So I'm going to go and create a data set. It's going to be from a Salesforce object, and I'll call it daily sales. And let me call it in this specific, in the spirit of this channel. This is the YouTube one, let's say. And I'm going to create a separate data flow because I am reading the data only for creating the story. So I might be specifying a specific schedule for this data flow. It's separate than the other normal data flows. So maybe I will only refresh this once a month because the data doesn't change that often. So it's just specifically in the spirit of not your regular data flows that would be running on a daily basis, even multiple times. Because you're reading it one time, you're creating the story. You might be reading first time a lot of records, but between today, first time you're reading, let's say, 1,000,000 records. Tomorrow, not a lot have changed, so that might not be significant enough to change the story. Okay, I am reading my object right here. It's a daily sales. I'm gonna go select city, daily sales, daily quantity, discount, again, the typical fields from the previous exercises and the other chapters, and promotion. So I'm going to examine these fields. As a reminder, you do not create one data set per object. So if I had another case, I would be building my data set across multiple objects, let's say opportunity, owners and accounts and products and so forth. In this case, it is a straightforward one, and I have my data set right here. I'm going to store it in that particular app that I just called daily sales Einstein Discovery work. I believe this is it. All right, so we're going to use this. And now that I have this simple data flow, it's going to run. I'm going to hit OK, and I will let it run. Okay, and the data set, as you just saw, it got created. So now I'm going to navigate back to my Analytics Studio, and I'm going to go back to my app, the one I just created, and I can go and check on my data set right here, daily sales YouTube. And next thing, remember, is to always gonna just give it a quick check, trying to explore it, to take a look at the data. So again, in the spirit of a complete deployment project, you want to take a look at the count of rows. That's how many records you have in this data set. You also want to look at the average daily quantity, actually both of them together. So let's put them next to each other. And I can see it's 335, average 30,000 rows almost in this data set. However, I want to see this at the, for example, by the different input fields. These are called the input variables, input fields. So let's say a city. I can see there's a nice distribution among the 10 cities I have here. And I can see also that I have some that have more than others. As you can see from a daily quantity, I have few cities that are doing much better than the other ones. Okay. So you can continue with that. Let me just exit this for a second and then come back into it. And it is recommended just to get an idea. So I can see San Francisco, Boston doing very well across the same number of rows. I can take a look at by, let's say, by promotion. I can see, for example, coupon doing very well. However, I don't have a lot of coupons. I have a lot of mail-in my data set, but they're not doing very well. And pretty much what I'm saying is not doing very well is if you just look at the data set, you filter for mail-in, you will see that the daily quantity numbers are typically small. That's what it is. There's no statistics, and from a modeling perspective right now. We're just taking a look at the data in our sample data set, what it is. Okay, so we're gonna assume we've explored it. And we're ready to create a story. Actually, one more tip really quick. If you ever hear sometimes about like imbalanced data set where you might have a data set that is not enough distributed across the variables, so typically in a binary thing, like let's say I'm tracking opportunities or customers that churned, and I have 95,000 records of customers that did not churn and 5,000 that churned. So it's kind of not really balanced to understand who is churning, who's not. And for that, you can always quickly just go and explore the data set, and you can quickly determine if it's, in that sense, is balanced or not. There are other techniques, but I'm just exploring or mentioning this because it is within the product and is easy to determine in this sense. So I'm going to go and create a story. And in again, I'm going to make it very simple. I'm going to maximize daily quantity. Are you expecting a whole number greater than or equal to 0? Yes. Let's say there's no refund or exchange policy here. So whatever the daily quantity is, it's going to be a positive number. This is, I just realized I didn't go over this, so I'll go one more time. This data set is tracking cities, months, and items that are being sold at a month level or during that month. So I have all these 30,000 records. And what's the discount on promotion that was used at that time? So again, this number is a positive number. So I'm telling the model that's going to get created, I'm telling Einstein Discovery, do not go and predict negative numbers. This just helps it to get a little bit better. And technically just making it a Poisson distribution, that's what it is. But again, I'm trying to maximize or at least make it a better model. And again, by telling it, do not predict negative numbers in this case. So we're going to go here and say daily sales. Let's call it daily sales YouTube. Let's just call it story for now. And it's in the same app. I have two options. Either I can select insights only, so I don't want to run the full power of the platform of them to create the model. And in the cases you will do that is when you have a large data set. It's the first time you're running it. You don't want to wait every time 5 minutes or 10 minutes or even half an hour, even an hour, depends on the data, just so that it runs, and then you immediately determine that you need to change something based on the first insights, and then you have to run it again, wait extra time. So it is recommended if you're first dealing with a large data set, just click insights and run it, and then within that story, once you take a look at it, do a little adjustments, you can run the full with predictions. Now I know this data set for this purpose, I will be running it with predictions. Again, it's the only difference, it will take more time, that's it. Sometimes just a few minutes, sometimes it's much more than that. The second screen is telling you, do you want to manually select the fields that you want to include in the story/model? I'm going to keep it automated. Then I can go and check or uncheck the fields if they were not included or included. The tip here is also you don't want to include your bias. You might go and say, no, I think this field doesn't matter. I'll take it out. So let it just automatically from the correlations it builds determine which fields should be included. Another tip here is if you have a large data set you're dealing with, maybe it has more than 50 columns, 100 or 200 columns, the story will not run unless you automatically or unless you manually select 50 fields. It will only run with 50. So if you go select automated, it will automatically create those or select the first 50 or maybe less, and allows you to run the story, and then you can override the selections if you need that. So we're going to click create story, and we're going to give it a few minutes or just some time to run. Okay, so my story came back, and I'm not going to spend again a lot of time on the insights. The other videos cover this in detail, but I will show a few enhancements or few new features since we are updating these videos now, summer 20. So you can see now I have some indicators of the total rows, average daily quantity. You will see here compare versions if I'm changing some of the settings. So if I go to settings, for example, right here, I can see all the data alerts. I can see the correlations, right? And again, you can see some of the outliers here. There's a message if you want to take out some of the outliers or not. You can see the strongest predictors, duplicates, saying like these fields might be acting as the same. One of the things that's cool here, you can see also a version history. So if you do change something in the story, you can come back and select the previous version or jump versions. Another very cool feature is the new algorithms that we are releasing. So you're gonna see the new algorithms like the GB boost and the XJ boost. You can see them here from the drop down. Unfortunately, on this environment, I don't have them enabled, but typically you will see them enabled here. Now you can let it run automatically, and automatic Einstein Discovery will select the best algorithm to provide the best result. Or if you know the typical composition of this data and you're a little bit technical and you know which particular algorithm you want to run, you can go and select the particular algorithm, the one you want. Another thing, for example, if I change, it's saying here take out city. So one of the things I always focus about there are two ways to compare the models. One is clicking on model metric, and in this case, it's just a number, so it's a linear, linear regression. You can look at advanced overview, and you can see some of these numbers, the R squared, MAE. You want a higher R squared, you want a lower MAE. So if you go back to settings and let's say we take out city as it's recommending, and then I run the story, and let's try to compare it. Now you're going to see that there's two ways to compare this. One through the model metrics, just by remembering those, or by viewing the compare models. So I'm going to show it to you in a second. One. Okay, so the story came back, and you can see that some of the things have changed here. So again, one of the ways to compare the difference, you can go down here and remember the metrics. So this is 0.3, 23. So although this went down significantly, but also R squared went down. So again, there's a decision here to be made. Another cool one is here. You can just click on compare models right here, and you can see these two models, and you can compare both the different metrics that came up, and you can look at them by overview or by metrics or by data. So all of this available for you. And I will actually skip back a little bit here and go back, close this, and go back to insights. Now there is another one you can see from here. So this will need me to make another change, maybe let's say for promotions. Let's say I wanted to include promotions, but I want to take out, I don't know, for some reason there's none, and this is not something I want to include in my analysis. And again, if I update the story, I'm going to get another version, and you can take a look at it, and you will see that this will come up with a different comparison right here. All right, so the new version came back, and I can actually click on compare versions right here. And this will, again, this is a new feature where you can see comparing the versions, what changed among the different values and the different fields. So it is a cool feature. Again, the reason I'm going over all of this, because whether you're creating the story first time or specifically within the realm of deploying a prediction, you will be tuning the model. That is a crucial step before just jumping and deploying the model. So those are a few of the new features. Another one, if you noticed, there's a little arrow here. So when you do some changes, like again, you can click on promotion. And if you are, let's say I want to re-include, so okay, I need to check this, include none. And now you can see that you can recalculate correlations on the fly. So again, all of these little features kind of help you when you're building your model and tuning specifically the model, again, / story in this case. All right. The last thing I want to mention, because this has come up a few times, is the AI bias. This is a big topic. So you want to make sure that if you do have a field that is sensitive, let's say city or something, you're gonna click on this and make it a sensitive field. You can see the shield right here. So when the story runs, you're gonna see next to the insights, next to those insights and the charts, a shield. So if it's a shield, that means it's coming from a protected field, and it's a decision to take it out of the story, and it will flag other fields that are acting as proxy to this one. Again, typical, common example is when you're approving loans. Sometimes zip code can act proxy to other sensitive fields, so you cannot, take a decision just based on including a zip code in the approval process. Okay. So again, just kind of skipping over this, I do want to go back to the first version, the one that had city, for example, and I can actually just delete these, from a maintenance perspective. This is the one without promotion or without none, and the other one is without city. I don't want this one, so I'm just going to go back to the first one, and again, I cannot emphasize enough on spending enough time to go and check the model metrics and kind of tuning them. But we're going to assume we're done. We're ready to deploy this. So we're going to start with the first deployment method. And in this sense, we are going to go and deploy the model to a Salesforce object. Now, for the Salesforce object, in this case, this is the daily sales. So I'm going to deploy the model or the story as a new prediction. So I'm going to give it daily quantity. Let's call it again YouTube prediction, or yep, that's the prediction title here. It is going to be a new prediction. It's a brand new prediction. It is specifically for the object. So we're going to go and add an object right here. So there are two options when you deploy the model. One is to deploy outside, whether it's in data flow or for API. One to deploy back to a Salesforce object. So this is what we're picking up here. We're going to put daily sales. We're looking for that object right here. And then we are going to map the fields, because in my story, these are the fields that I used in the story. I included all of them. These are the fields from the object. They happen to be the same name, so there's automatic mapping. That's the only fields on that object. Now, there is a cool use case here where you can add a supplemental data set. So there are use cases where your fields in your object are not enough to create the story or create the model. I will use a simple example here. For example, let's say I was bringing temperature. Let's say there was temperature, and I was using another data set brought somewhere externally and kind of mapping it back on month or some ID and kind of bringing temperature into my model. So when I ran the model, it gave me all these predictions based on having all these 6 fields. So when I map it back to my object does not have temperature. So when the record I am trying to score in the object comes back to the prediction and tries to score that particular city, that particular discount month, and so forth, there's no temperature. It can go back and add it from the supplemental data set, so you can map it so that when the record is coming in, based on the ID or the relation, it goes to that data set, which is, let's say, refreshed on a daily basis in this case, brings in the temperature, gives you the exact scoring, and you get a perfect scoring. So this thing, add supplemental data sets, very important. Typical CRM use cases would be maybe if you have the number of activities to the opportunity or cases data to opportunities and so forth. All right, so I'm done here configuring or mapping the fields. The next section is configuring my prediction field. So on this object, I can actually go and create a custom field that's going to store the prediction. It's going to store the prediction there. So I'm going to create a new prediction, and I'm going to call it, let's say, predicted quantity in this case, and I'm going to call it again YouTube just for distinguishing it. So this field will be created on the object. Okay, so I'll go back and talk how we kind of update the prediction score there. Now that I have a field on the object that's stored with the data and the object on the Salesforce database side, for example, I can specify a terminal state. I can specify for Einstein Discovery to know, or for that particular prediction that I'm building right now, to know when this record has reached a terminal state and it is no more need to predict. And I can compare the accuracy, the actual number versus the prediction number. So in our case, for example, if daily quantity was filled out, that means, it's already filled out, that there's no need to predict anymore. So let me explain this. If daily quantity on the record is greater than or equal to 0, then it has a number. Then there's no need to predict anymore the future. Now I can go compare my prediction that's stored in this field that I created on the page before this to the actual number, which is daily quantity. Another typical example is in opportunities. You will specify the terminal state as the opportunity closed, right? If once it's closed, then there's no need to predict, days to close or the opportunity amount. You can go back and use this fact into, monitoring the prediction accuracy and, doing some of that stuff, from an accuracy perspective there. Now, this screen tells you if you want to add fields to segment the data. Remember when I was talking about creating separate models for separate regions, or a model for, let's say in this case, daily quantity, you wanted to create a model for data that is smaller than 500, and another one for large daily quantities. So you'll have two models and you'll deploy them under the same prediction. You will use this screen to filter each model applies to which kind of data. In this case, it's all the same. So we're going to keep going here. And we're going to select actionable variables. So that means if Einstein Discovery says, this is the score, however, you can increase or decrease it by doing X, Y, Z. What are the fields, the things that you can actually change? I cannot change the city. I cannot move the whole store. I can change the discount and I can change the promotion. So those are two things I can change and I will mark as actionable variables. So the recommendations will come regarding these two, not, for example, change city from Boston to New York and you will increase daily quantity and so forth. All right, so I'm going to review this. I'm ready to deploy. I hit deploy and my model is deployed. And that is how you deploy the model. That is how easy it is to bring all of your work that you did on the data prep side and you're doing the model tuning and figuring out the perfect model or the more accurate model and bringing the last mile to the end users, because now we're going to see for the end users how they're going to use or how they're going to perceive these predictions and explanations and the actions that they can take on this data. So for this section, I'm just going to go back to the daily sales. So I'm just going to pick any of these and go look for the daily sales record or object. So I can, maybe just search for it right here. And it's daily. So there you go, daily sales. This is the object. And first time if you're doing this, you might see nothing under recently viewed. So you might want to click on this arrow and see all records. These are all the records that are already here. So I'm just going to click on one of them. And you can see that already there's a card. This is the Einstein prediction lightning component. I'm going to go all the way up and click on setup, go to edit page. And when I'm editing page, obviously you need some admin rights here to edit the object. So if you're doing this in a sandbox, not in these orgs, you will not see the component here. So let me just redo it. So let me just delete it. And these are the components relating to Einstein Analytics. The dashboard is the one you embed the dashboard, and Einstein Predictions is the one you embed the Einstein Discovery prediction in this case. So we are going to drag it here. Now the component is ready. Then I will go and specify which prediction I'm going to use. And I believe I gave it a YouTube right here. So there are many predictions. You just want to make sure which prediction it is. Immediately I see the score happening. This is a real-time score, real-time explanations, real-time actions. This is not stored on the object, right? This is a runtime component. The field that we created behind the scene, it's somewhere on this object, and it can score and store the data. So I'll talk about this in a bit. But I do want to mention that there are some settings you can control here and change as needed. So I'm going to hit save. You might hit the activation pop-up window, say activate, set as org default, so forth. But I do want to tie it up here or kind of finish here to show to you that this is how the end user is going to consume those predictions that we've already kind of validated or we've monitored them. Or even in a dark lunch, for example, if you're not ready to deploy this to all users, this component has a visibility filter, so you can maybe just deploy it to certain users if you want that as an early stage. So there's a component visibility right here that you can control, and you can launch it as a dark launch. Okay, so how will the end user use it, and where is that terminal state? Because for now I have 221. This particular one is a bad example. We didn't really spend too much time on the model, but it's a 120 versus 221. But the prediction field that we created is not storing any data yet, right? The only the way it will store that 221 is when you edit the record, and you don't have to edit and change any value. Just by the fact you edit it and hit save, now that particular field for this particular record, it's storing 221. So this is how it's supposed to work from the end user. Is you look at something, you take an action, you score it, you kick it off. Now for this particular use case, what is actually a practical example, because daily quantity here is already filled. So the way you want to think about, maybe I'm a store manager, let's say I'm from Boston, and I want to see for August, and I want to see what's my let's say sunglasses, what promotion should I use, right? So again, for August next month, for Boston, which is a good city by the way from a daily quantity perspective, for items, let's say sunglasses right here, and I don't know which promotion, so I'm gonna make it none, and yes, I'm gonna use a discount. I don't know daily quantity. Let Einstein Discovery give me a hint what kind of promotions, what kind of campaign I should be running here, and immediately tells me, okay, we are predicting you're gonna be $497. These are the factors. They're all green. It's a good thing. Boston is good. Boston in August is good, and so forth. How to improve this? Well, if you change promotion to display or contest, or these things, you're gonna get a boost in the number. But so if I only change this to display, $497, let me go to promotion and change this to display. And by the fact, if I save this, now it's gonna get that boost. Notice now it's 903, and my stored field already have a 903. So that is how you're gonna manage it or use it from a front end or from the end user. However, the next typical question would be, and actually I do want to show you that the field is there. So let me just go really quick to setup, and we are going to take a look at this particular object under Object Manager. We're going to try to find daily sales right here, and I can see under fields and relationships. So I see my custom field right here, predicted quantity YouTube is right being created here. This is from a previous deployment. Right now you can have 3 prediction fields that are storing from 3 different predictions per object. That's a limitation. And again, so that keep in mind. So if you want to delete something, you have to delete the prediction, come back and delete this field if you are in that stage of implementing stuff, or you change the whole prediction. Again, I'm talking about prediction, not a model. Multiple models can be under the same prediction. Okay. So I want to go back just briefly and mention I did score. So I have the Lightning component, that card, it's showing me real time. And I did mention that if you edit the record, then you actually kick off the scoring. But what happens if I want to score all of the records? So I have a lot of opportunities there, and I don't want to go and click on each one by one, or these daily daily sales records. So we're going to go to Model Manager briefly. Again, there will be a video talking about this, but I'm going to go to Model Manager. This is where I monitor all of my predictions. So I can see I have 6 active here. I already have 3 predictions, probably 2 of them, the ones I just kicked. And I can see this is the one we just used right now. There's one warning, it's fine, it's a regression. I can click on it and I can see that again, I just deployed, so there's not a lot of metrics here from the error perspective and accuracy. I do need to use this on a daily basis or multiple records to see what's happening. I can look at the settings, and again, we can modify it. This is the field that got created. This is an important tip also. I can see the prediction ID. Sometimes when you go advanced and you're tracking a prediction somewhere, you can find the ID right here. But what I wanted to show you today, or in this video right here, is the scoring. So now, as of summer 20, you can just go and click on score data, and you can score all the records or all the ones that don't have daily quantity. Remember, we defined terminal state by daily quantity being greater than or equal to 0. So this is the records on the fly. Or I can go and score a subset, whatever that subset. So this is a great feature, and again, I can score all, or I can just, for brevity, let me go and say, score all daily quantity, smaller than 500. I know there's a lot of those records. And if I hit start scoring, it's just going to go and score these records behind the scenes. So this is cool and kind of completes the topic of deploying the prediction back to a Salesforce object. In this case, it was a custom object, no problem. We mapped the fields. We did not use a supplemental data set. We created a prediction field on the object that we can use later. Of course, once that prediction field is populated by the scoring, you can go and use it in an operation report, or you can pull it back to Einstein Analytics in the data set and do some other stuff.